The president of Americans for Prosperity, Tim Phillips, joins us again. Mr. Phillips, thanks for sticking with us.
You bet. Glad to be here.
All right. As I have explained, I think it's important that you have a long history, a long effective history in advocacy politics. So I want to ask you about something I have never understood about your background. While you were working at Century Strategies and Millennium Marketing, Jack Abramoff was representing the Marianas Islands, and that's a place where you could sew a Made in the USA label into clothes made by Chinese workers in conditions that were not subject to U.S. safety standards. And your company, Millennium Marketing, put out mailers to Christians in Alabama asking them to lobby to keep those Chinese workers there because, I'm quoting, they are exposed to the teachings of Jesus Christ while working in the Marianas, and that many, quote, are converted to the Christian faith and return to China with Bibles in hand. When you look back at that, do you stand by that?
I didn't do that particular project at Century, but I don't have an issue with it. I don't. I think that you have an opportunity in politics to make your point of view, and to some Americans that would matter. The being able to spread the gospel would matter to them. I think that's a relatively reasonable point of view to have. I didn't do that project, but I'm not going to disown it.
But you were at Millennium Marketing when that happened.
I was at Century Strategies.
At Century Strategies, and Millennium Marketing is part of that.
Correct.
All right. The reason that I wanted to ask you about this is because a year before that mailing went out, the Interior Department had published a report. It was a year before that said actually what Chinese workers were getting in the Marianas was not religion, but they were getting sweatshop conditions and forced prostitution and forced abortions. And that was the U.S. government's official policy on the working conditions for Chinese workers before you sent that out saying, listen, they're becoming Christians.
Well, before Millennium Marketing sent that out
I had been part of that group sending out that mailing when that was the public knowledge of what was happening to those workers. I would disown it. I would apologize for it. And I'm troubled that you don't. I feel like that's really hard to understand.
I think that it's easy to attack anyone. You can pull out. You've been on
sweatshop conditions and forced prostitution and forced abortions.
Well, before Millennium Marketing sent that out
sweatshop conditions and forced prostitution and forced abortions. Prostitution and forced abortions. Prostitution and forced abortions. Prostitution and forced abortions.
But I don't have an issue with it.
Prostitution and forced abortions.
The being able to spread the gospel would matter to them. I think that's a relatively reasonable point of view to have.
Prostitution and forced abortions.
But I don't have an issue with it.
Prostitution and forced abortions.
The being able to spread the gospel.
Prostitution and forced abortions.
Would matter to them. I think that's a relatively reasonable point of view to have.
Prostitution and forced abortions.
Now we are free.
But I don't have an issue with it.
Prostitution and forced abortions.
But I don't have an issue with it.